I think Trump, in lots of ways, is a refreshing reminder that the guy that's in the White House is another human being, and that bringing that power back to human scale is an important part of what needs to be done to correct the insanity that's been going on in the post-war era.
Louis Rossetto is the co-founder of Wired magazine and the co-recipient of the very first Lanny Friedlander Prize from Reason. It honors an individual or group who has created a publication, medium, or distribution platform that vastly expands human freedom. In 1971, while an undergraduate at Columbia University, he co-authored a story in the New York Times Magazine titled The New Right Credo, Libertarianism. Liberalism, conservatism, and leftist radicalism are all bankrupt philosophies, he wrote. Refugees from the old right, the old left, and the new left are organizing independently under the banner of libertarianism. Rossetto's newest project is a novel called Change is Good, a story from the heroic era of the internet, which he and designer Eric Spiekerman launched on Kickstarter. The project raised nearly $200,000 and is going out to backers now.
Louis, thanks for talking.
Pleasure to be here.
What's the plot of Change is Good? It's a novel, right?
Just an easy question to start with. There are 6 characters. Each of them have their own stories. I suppose for this, for you at this moment, the most interesting thing about the book is the focus on that time. The book is set in the 1990s. And the 1990s were this pivotal moment in world history where, well, cast your mind back. It was a period of unbelievable optimism.
So the Cold War is over, the internet is taking off, is becoming a mass medium.
The Cold War
economy is doing great.
The Cold War ends at the beginning of the 90s. The internet takes off with the arrival of the web. The period, there's drugs, ecstasy, the rave culture, multiple different levels. There are massive changes going on that are affecting all aspects of our life. And so the 90s is this pivotal moment where there's this burst of optimism. Young people are arriving in this new space of the internet, the web, digital technologies in general. And there's a sense that the future is utterly malleable. For the first time in a long time, after the Cold War, the fear and anxiety of the Cold War, now there's this open running room. It's the end of history, literally, Fukuyama says so. And now anything's possible. Any weird, crazy idea that you have is no longer bound by normal restrictions like finance or law or even physical bounds.
It is incredibly hard to go back to those early days of even pre-internet culture, but even AOL, American Online, had the walled garden where people were anonymous. You had, fake names that you would use and talk about anything, Usenet groups. You could reproduce things cheaply. DVD players were $7 or whatever.
I mean, companies that had zero income had billion-dollar valuations. Companies were more valuable than General Motors that were selling in the tens of millions of dollars. And you had Bill Clinton saying the era of big government is over. There were all sorts of things happening in society at that moment, in all levels of society, that were pointing toward a millennial future that was going to be almost utopian. And there were people involved in the 90s that were making that happen. The Gen Xers of that time were adventurers and revolutionaries, consciously looking to travel to a new land west of California and bring back fresh kill for the human race. And that was a future. And they were actively out there making that new future.
So that's what's heroic. I mean, in the sense that people felt like they could do heroic undertakings and that you could do whatever, if you could dream it, you could do it. I mean, it's kind of like Walt Disney on ecstasy.
It's heroic when you do it in the face of danger and opposition, which you also had at the same time, because you were moving like Lewis and Clark into this new territory that was undefined, that was unmapped, and that was full of danger in lots of ways. Any company could go under at any moment. Any weirdness could be popping out of the things that you're discovering. And so Change is Good is about 6 characters exploring this new realm, like Lewis and Clark, going out into this uncharted territory and helping to discover what that was all about, and in fact also helping to create our future. It takes place in 1998, which is another pivotal moment within a pivotal moment, because for most of the 90s, there was this expansionary sense of the future looking incredibly wonderful. And then there was this ton of money that flowed into the sector in 1998. And that became, what was the digital revolution became the dot-com bubble. And what was utopian became greed. And so I'm trying to examine that particular tipping point between the moment when people had fire in their eyes and wanted to change the world, and they ended up being, I guess, perverted in a kind of way into, or seduced into pursuing the pure joy of making a lot of money.
I hope one day to experience that myself. But what if that was the heroic age of the internet? How would you characterize the internet now, or America now? It does not seem to be. The internet does not seem to be particularly heroic, does it?
I think the internet's just become part of our life. It's gone from a cult to the culture, and it's just everything that's normal today is connected, as we said it would be, to digital technologies and the networks themselves. I think you have to look to other places to see where this edge is today, and in many ways what Jane is doing is looking for that edge again.
At Neolife.
At Neolife,
yeah. And so a lot of it is, and it's kind of interesting because baby boomers obviously also took charge in the 90s. I mean, when Bill Clinton was the first baby boomer president in 92, and baby boomers have long been accused of being solipsistic and inward looking. But
totally true.
Yeah, but also now literally that's happening, right? Because we're looking at our own bodies and changing them in ways that were unimaginable even a few years ago.
There's a new generation that's pursuing this new adventure, and there are new adventures out there. I think the internet's become the background. There is still an edge. There are still edges all over the place. The genetic revolution is one of them. Space is another. Transportation is another one. I mean, there are explorations to be had all over the place. The kind of incredible fervor that you saw with the arrival of the internet that affected everything simultaneously all over the planet, that kind of change is unlikely to happen in the same broad way that it did then. Instead, you have a bunch of little or smaller changes that are erupting and that will become their own major thing, but there are just lots of them happening out there.
You also talk about the book, and this brings us to Eric Spiekerman, but it's a revolution in printing. What is unique about the printing process, and why the attention to that detail?
Why make a bunch of atoms, put together a bunch of atoms to experience this story instead of just putting it out digitally? It's a very good question, because in the end we also wanted to create another experience. There's a story, which is an abstraction in lots of ways, and then there's the physical object of the book. And in lots of ways, books have become devalued as they've migrated into the digital domain, and the book itself, as an object, has become degraded. It's a mass object that is not special, that doesn't deliver a great experience. The inks are not great, the paper's not great, the binding's not great. Nothing about it is special. And so we said, why don't we make a real, but nevertheless, it's still the best way to read things. I mean, we like to read things on screen, but still paper offers the best way to read. And so we said, why don't we make a special experience, the best experience we can make in the 21st century for reading itself. That required Eric to begin an exploration of printing itself. And he rediscovered an old way of printing, letterpress, instead of the more normal way everything is printed today, which is offset. Letterpress is actually an image pressed into a piece of paper. And it's something that got lost in mass marketing because it just couldn't make the transition to the new technologies for producing print. And what Eric has done is reinvented a way of producing plates for letterpress, which enable you to use all the digital tools for publication, but apply them to this classic technology of letterpress. And so he created tools to make the plates that go on the press. And this particular book, Change is Good, is among the very first to use his technology. It's the first one that he's designing and publishing himself. And it's just a special experience to read crisp type impressed in the paper where it's actually, you actually have a physical impression in the paper, which adds a third dimension to the experience of reading, which we don't really know about anymore because everything we get is offset, which is completely flat. So you have the experience of the impression of the paper, the impression of the type on the paper, and then you also have black ink, which you never get with offset. Offset is by definition a variance of gray, where this ink that's pressed into the paper is actually black. And so altogether, the experience of reading Change is Good is basically state-of-the-art for the 21st century.
And then you also have thrown in a Spotify soundtrack.
Also because we can.
Yes. Okay.
And so if you look at the very beginning of the book, there's a link to Spotify, which enables you to listen to the soundtrack that we put together, which is like 10 hours of music for listening to the book at your leisure.
We've known each other for about 20 years now, or coming up on 20 years. One of the things over the past couple of years that, you have always been a maverick, at a time when during Wired you were, seen as suspiciously libertarian and your proclivities and whatnot. You have surprised a lot of people over the past couple of years by being, if not pro-Trump, pro-Donald Trump, you were enjoying his intervention into politics, into the political status quo. How do you feel about him after a year in office? And, what is it about him that piques your curiosity? And, what is he bringing to the stage that you think is, really vital?
I think for most of my life, my tendency has been to try to diminish the power of the state in general. And part of that is literal power, and part of it is the power that's in your head. And the presidency has taken on this otherworldly position in people's minds that is beyond popehood. It's this figure of immense authority that you are obliged to respect, and that you and that has all this, and has the because of the power of the United States in general, has the ability to project that power all over the planet. I think Trump, in lots of ways, is a refreshing reminder that the guy that's in the White House is another human being, and the power of the state is way too exalted, and that bringing that power back to human scale is an important part of what needs to be done to correct the insanity that's been going on in the post-war era, to where you have these large institutions that control all aspects of our lives. So leeching respect and authority out of the state is kind of a good thing on its own level. And maybe I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, well, we will leave it there. We've been talking with Louis Rossetto, the co-founder of Wired, and the novelist behind Change is Good, a story of the heroic era of the internet and a revolution in printing. Louis, thanks for talking.
Pleasure as always.
For Reason, I'm Nick Gillespie.